The night my stepdad threw me out, he told me I should be grateful. Grateful, because instead of leaving me with nothing, he said I'd inherited something valuable, something that had been in my mom's family for years. But what he actually handed me was a crumpled deed to a dusty, long-forgotten apothecary in a town I'd never even heard of, and he laughed. Actually laughed when I asked if it was a joke, because according to him, the place was worthless, a money pit, a dead business that hadn't seen a customer in over a decade. And the truth is, I believed him at first, I really did, because standing there with my duffel bag half-packed and my entire life shoved into a few cheap zippers, it felt like the kind of thing he'd do. Kick me out and make sure I had nowhere real to go. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that the place he thought was garbage was the only reason I wouldn't end up with nothing, the only reason I wouldn't end up sleeping in my car or begging friends for couches, because hidden behind that peeling paint and faded sign was something my mom never told me about, something she kept secret right up until the day she died. And it started with that folder he slid across the kitchen table like it meant nothing, like it was just paperwork, like it wasn't the last thing she ever left for me. I remember staring at it, flipping through the pages while he leaned against the counter watching me, arms crossed, waiting for me to react. And when I saw the address, I actually laughed a little because it sounded ridiculous. Some tiny town hours away, a shop with a name that felt like it belonged in another century. And when I looked up at him and asked, "What am I supposed to do with this?" he just shrugged and said, "Sell it, burn it, live in it, I don't care. It's yours now." And there was something about the way he said it, like he was washing his hands of me completely, like this was the final step in getting me out of his life. That made my chest feel tight, because 3 months earlier my mom was still here, still cooking dinner, still telling me everything would be okay, even when she was the one lying in a hospital bed. And now she was gone, and I was standing in a house that didn't feel like mine anymore, being handed a worthless inheritance like it was some kind of consolation prize. I didn't argue, though. I didn't have the energy for it, so I packed the rest of my things in silence, grabbed the folder, and walked out without looking back, because I knew if I did, I'd either say something I couldn't take back or realize just how alone I actually was, and neither of those felt survivable in that moment. The drive to the town took almost 5 hours, and the entire time I kept thinking about my mom, about why she would leave me something like this without ever mentioning it, about all the times she could have told me and didn't. And it didn't make sense because she wasn't the kind of person who kept big secrets, at least not from me. And yet here, I was heading toward a place that felt like it belonged to someone else entirely, someone I didn't know. And the closer I got, the more the roads narrowed and the more everything started to look the same. Old buildings, quiet streets, the kind of place where people notice a new car immediately. And when I finally pulled into town, it felt like I'd stepped into a place that time had forgotten, like everything was stuck just a little bit in the past. And right there on the main street, between a closed-down hardware store and a diner with a flickering sign, was the Apothecary. I almost missed it at first because the sign was so faded you could barely read it. The windows were dusty, and the whole place looked like it had been closed for years. But there was something strange about it too, something that didn't match the rest of the neglect, because while everything around it looked abandoned, the door itself looked intact, like it had been taken care of, like someone had made sure it stayed locked and undisturbed instead of just letting it fall apart. And when I got out of the car and walked up to it, I felt this weird hesitation, like I was about to step into something I didn't understand, something bigger than just an old shop. And I don't know why, but my hand actually paused before putting the key in the lock, because suddenly it didn't feel like I was just opening a building. It felt like I was opening something my mom had intentionally left closed, something she hadn't wanted me to see until now. And that thought alone made my stomach twist, because if this place was really as worthless as my stepdad said, then why had she kept it? Why had she protected it? And why hadn't she told me about it? And I stood there for a few seconds longer than I want to admit, just staring at the door, before finally pushing the key in and turning it, the lock clicking open with a sound that felt too clean, too smooth for a place that was supposed to be forgotten. And when I pushed the door open, a small bell chimed above me, soft, clear, unmistakably functional. And that was the moment everything shifted, because nothing about that sound matched the story I'd been told. Nothing about it felt abandoned or broken. And as I stepped inside and the door closed behind me, I realized that whatever this place was, Whatever my mom had left me, it wasn't worthless, not even close. And somehow, without understanding why yet, I knew my stepdad had been wrong about more than just the shop. The first thing I noticed after that bell rang wasn't the dust, it was the absence of it. Because sure, there was a thin layer on the shelves and counters like no one had wiped them down in a while. But it wasn't thick, it wasn't neglected, it wasn't what you'd expect from a place that had supposedly been closed for years. And that alone made me stop just inside the doorway, my hand still on the knob, as I looked around trying to reconcile what I was seeing with what I'd been told, because none of it lined up. Rows of glass jars filled the walls from floor to ceiling, each one carefully labeled in neat, consistent handwriting, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that belongs to someone who knows exactly what they're doing. And I found myself stepping closer almost without thinking, reading them one by one. Things like chamomile, valerian root, peppermint, all normal at first, all things you could probably find in any herbal shop. But then the labels started to change, becoming more specific, more unsettling in a way I couldn't quite explain, like deep sleep blend, measured dose only, or nerve tonic, do not combine. And then ones that made me pause entirely, like memory extract, dilute before use. And I remember actually saying out loud, "Okay, what is this place?" Because it didn't feel like a store anymore. It felt like something else entirely, something closer to a lab or a clinic. Except there were no modern machines, no computers, just wood shelves, glass, containers, handwritten notes, and a silence that felt intentional, like it was holding its breath. I moved deeper inside, running my fingers along the counter, noticing how everything was arranged with purpose, nothing out of place, nothing random. And that's when I saw the ledger sitting behind the register, partially tucked beneath a stack of envelopes like it hadn't been meant for display, but also hadn't been hidden very well either. And something about it pulled me in immediately, maybe because it looked used, not forgotten, like someone had been coming back to it again and again. And when I opened it, I realized just how wrong my stepdad had been. Because this wasn't a record of a failed business. It was a record of something active, something that had mattered to people. Page after page was filled with names, dates, notes written in that same careful handwriting, and next to them, amounts, sometimes small, sometimes shockingly large, thousands of dollars exchanged for things. That didn't sound like products at all. Entries like pain removed, full extraction, or insomnia resolved, permanent. And I remember flipping faster, my heart starting to pound as I tried to make sense of it. Because there was no way this was real. No way people were paying this kind of money for herbal remedies. No way any of it could be what it sounded like. And yet the consistency of it, the detail, the repetition, it didn't feel fake. It felt documented, like proof of something I wasn't ready to believe in yet. And then I saw her name, and everything else just stopped. Because there it was in the middle of the page, written exactly the way she always wrote it, my mom's name, followed by a date from about a year before she died, and next to it, instead of a payment or a treatment, there was a note that made my chest tighten so hard I had to grip the counter to steady myself. Transferred ownership. He's not ready, but he will be. And I didn't need to guess who he was. I knew. And suddenly all those questions I'd been asking on the drive here came rushing back. Only now they felt heavier, sharper, because this wasn't just something she forgot to mention. This was something she had chosen not to tell me. Something she had planned for me without ever explaining why. And I remember whispering, "Why wouldn't you tell me?" Like she might somehow answer, like she might still be here in the walls of the place. And that's when the bell rang again. I froze instantly, my head snapping toward the door as it opened slowly, the sound echoing just enough to make the silence feel even deeper. And for a split second, I thought maybe I'd imagined everything. Maybe someone was just walking into a normal store expecting to buy tea or something simple. But the woman who stepped inside didn't look confused, didn't hesitate, didn't even glance around like she was checking if the place was open. She walked straight toward the counter like she'd done it 100 times before, her eyes settling on me with a calm certainty that made my stomach drop. And before I could say anything, before I could even figure out how to explain that I had no idea what I was doing there, she spoke, her voice steady and almost relieved. "You're finally here." And those 4 words hit harder than anything else had so far, because they meant this wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This was expected. And I shook my head instinctively, already backing up a step as I said, "I think you've got The wrong place. This shop, it's not open. I just got here. I don't even know what this is. But she didn't react the way I expected, didn't argue or question me. She just nodded slightly, like she'd heard this before, like she'd been waiting for me to say exactly that. And then she reached in her bag and placed a small envelope on the counter between us, her eyes never leaving mine as she said, "Your mother helped my husband. Years ago. We've been waiting for you to come back." And I remember staring at the envelope without touching it, my mind racing, because none of this made sense. None of it fit with the version of my mom I thought I knew. And yet there was something in the way this woman spoke, something in the way she stood there like this was the most normal interaction in the world, that made it impossible to just dismiss it. And when I finally picked up the envelope and opened it, the sight of the cash inside, thick, folded, undeniably real, made my hands start to shake, because this wasn't a joke, this wasn't some misunderstanding. This was proof that whatever this place was, whatever my mom had been doing here, it had been real enough for people to come back, real enough for them to trust me without even knowing who I was yet. And as I looked up at her again, trying to find some explanation, some way to make sense of everything that was happening, she just gave a small, knowing smile and said quietly, "You don't understand it yet. That's okay. You will." And in that moment, standing behind a counter I never asked for in a shop I didn't believe in, holding money I hadn't earned for something I didn't know how to do, I realized the truth wasn't just hidden in this place, it was waiting for me to catch up to it. The first time I actually used anything from the shop, it wasn't because I believed in it, it was because I didn't have a choice, because 3 days after that woman walked in and handed me an envelope full of cash like this place was still running, like I was supposed to just step into a role I didn't understand. The bell rang again. Only this time it wasn't calm or quiet or expected, it was frantic, the door swinging open hard enough to rattle the glass as a man rushed in carrying a kid who looked barely conscious, his face pale, his breathing shallow and uneven like something inside him was shutting down. And I remember stepping back immediately, instinctively, my hands going up as I said, "Hey, I think you've got the wrong place." "I'm not." But he cut me off before I could even finish, his voice shaking as he said, "Please, someone told me to come here, said this place could help. The hospital couldn't figure it out. I'll pay whatever it takes. Just, please." And there was something in the way he said it, something desperate and raw, that made it impossible to just send him away. Even though every logical part of my brain was screaming that I had no idea what I was doing, that this wasn't real, that I could make things worse, not better. And for a second I just stood there frozen, caught between walking away and stepping into something I didn't understand, until I looked at the kid again and saw his chest barely rising, saw the way his dad's hands were shaking trying to hold him steady, and something in me shifted, something that didn't feel like a decision so much as a pull, like being guided towards something I hadn't learned but somehow recognized. I told him to lay the kid down on the long wooden bench near the back, my voice quieter than I expected, steadier than I felt. And as I moved behind the counter, my eyes started scanning the shelves without me fully controlling where they landed, like I was searching for something specific even though I couldn't explain what it was. And then I saw it, a small jar tucked between others, labeled in that same neat handwriting, "Stabilizer, acute use only." And my heart started pounding because I didn't remember reading that one before, didn't remember learning anything about it. And yet when I picked it up, it felt familiar in a way that didn't make sense, like muscle memory without the memory, like my hands knew what to do even if my mind didn't. And I grabbed a second jar almost immediately after, one labeled respiratory support, dilute. And before I could stop myself, before I could second guess any of it, I was already mixing them in a small glass vial, measuring without thinking, adjusting without hesitation, like I'd done it 100 times before. And in the back of my mind, beneath the panic and the confusion, I heard something, my mom's voice, soft and calm, the way it used to be when she was teaching me something simple, something small, saying, "You don't guess. You listen. The body tells you what it needs." And I don't know if it was a memory or something else entirely, but it grounded me just enough to keep going, just enough to trust what I was doing even if I didn't understand it. I handed the mixture to the man, telling him to help the kid drink it slowly, watching closely as he did, every second stretching out longer than it should have, every breath the kid took sounding like it might be his last. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought I'd made a mistake. Thought I'd just given false hope to someone who needed real help. But then something changed, subtle at first. The kid's breathing evening out just slightly, his chest rising a little more steadily, the tension in his face easing like whatever had been gripping him was starting to let go. And the man noticed it too, his eyes widening as he looked at me like I'd just done something impossible, something I wasn't supposed to be able to do. And I just stood there, staring back, trying to process what I was seeing because it didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. And yet it was happening right in front of me. Within minutes, the kid's color started coming back, not fully, not completely, but enough to shift the room from panic to something else. Hope, maybe, or disbelief. And when he finally opened his eyes, weak but aware, his dad let out a sound I'll never forget, something between a laugh and a sob, like relief hitting all at once after being held back for too long. And he kept saying thank you over and over again, like I'd saved his life, like I knew what I was doing, and I didn't know how to respond to that because I didn't feel like I deserved it, didn't feel like I'd earned it. But at the same time I couldn't deny what had just happened, couldn't pretend it was coincidence or luck, because deep down I knew it wasn't. I knew there was something real about this place, something my mom had understood and protected and passed on to me whether I was ready or not. After they left, after the bell rang one more time and the shop fell quiet again, I sat behind the counter with the ledger open in front of me, staring at her name, at the note she'd left, at the life she'd lived here that I'd never known about. And for the first time since she died, I didn't feel lost. I didn't feel like everything had been taken from me, because this strange, impossible place was proof that she hadn't just left me behind. She'd left something for me to step into, something that mattered, something that could actually help people. And suddenly my stepdad's words didn't feel heavy anymore, didn't feel true, because he thought he'd kicked me out with nothing, thought he'd dumped a worthless burden on me to get me out of his life. But he was wrong about all of it, wrong about the shop, wrong about my mom, and wrong about me, because sitting there in that quiet apothecary, surrounded by shells I was only just beginning to understand, I realized I hadn't been left with nothing at all. I'd been left with something rare, something powerful, something that didn't just give me a place to stay but a reason to stay. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was needed, and that changed everything.